Good morning, guys. Hope you all are doing well today. We are going to continue our unit on patterns and graphs, and today we're going to look at patterns and tables. So make sure you've got your binders out, open up to lesson 9.3, and we are going to start off with a couple of bell ringers like usual. So I've got my cup here. Let's see who's going to the board for us today. Sun Young, can you do number 1? And Liliette, will you do number 2, please? If they are not here for some reason, somebody fill in for them. But go ahead and do those bell ringers and then pause the video and resume it when you're ready. Okay, so for the first one, what we should do is say, okay, I've got an x plus 4, and if I need to get x by itself, I have to look at what's happening between the x and the 4. They're being added, so I have to do the opposite operation and subtract 4 from both sides. So I'm going to minus 4 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 6 minus 4. They're the same sign, so I add them, keep the sign. So 6 plus 4 is 10, keep the negative, so x equals negative 10. Then we have 7t equals 112. 7 and t are being multiplied, so we have to do the opposite operation and divide by 7 on both sides. T equals, and if I divide that by 7, I should get 16. And then I'm going to get t equals 16 and be good to go. All right. So we are going to jump right in to example 1. It says the table shows the price of fresh fish. Use it to answer the following questions. First of all, complete the table and then write a rule for the table. And then we're going to look ahead and say, what would the cost of 20 pounds of fresh fish be? So first, to complete the table, we have to look at what is the pattern that's happening here. How are we getting from one price to the next? So how are we getting from 6.5, that should say 6.50, to 13, from 13 to 19.5? And if I look at this, I can take this value right here minus this value. And if I do 13 minus 6.5, I should get 6.5. They're adding 6.5 every time. And that works again. If I do 13, let me check it, 13 plus 6.5. I would get 19.5. So that works. I'm adding 6.5 every time. So I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to add 6.5 here. So I'm going to get 0, 0, carry the 1. And so I'm going to have 6, carry the 1. So I'm going to get 26. And then I'm going to add 6.5 again. And this one I should end up with 32.50. So we should have 26 and 32.5. So my rule is going to be, what are we doing to get from 1 pound to the next? So if I get 1 more pound, it's adding 6.50 per pound. So my rule is going to look like the price is equal to whatever the number of pounds are. I'm going to use F for fresh fish. It's 6.50 per pound. And we've talked about that word per before and how it means multiply. So since I'm spending 6.50 per pound, I'm going to do 6.50 times F. So there's my rule. And then I'm going to use that to find the cost of 20 pounds of fresh fish. I know that I've got P equals 6.5. And I need to multiply that by the 20. Excuse me. Now, if I multiply those together, I should get P equals 130. And it's $130, but this is a word problem, so we are going to write a sentence. We're going to say the cost of 20 pounds of fresh fish is $130. All right. Second one, find the values of the variables in the table. So now what we need to start thinking about is what's the relationship to get from one value to the next? From one value to the next. So how am I getting from 3 to 66? And it has to match all the way across. So if I look at this, I can say, well, to get from 3 to 66, I could do plus 63, because 3 plus 63 equals 66. I could also do 3, I know that 66 is divisible by 3, so if I do 3 times 22, that equals 66. So let's see what works here. If I'm doing addition, I would get 5 plus, it would have to be plus 105 equals 110, but those don't work, so I'm going to cross those out. 110 is divisible by 5, and if I do that, I'm going to get 5 times 22 equals 110. And now I can see a similar pattern here. Both of these I can multiply by 22. So here what I'm going to do is say I can do x times 22 equals 132. To solve this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, since they're being multiplied, I'm going to take both sides and divide them by 22. And when I do 132 divided by 22, I get 6. So there's my first variable. And over here, I'm going to take 11 times 22. I'm taking that top number times the 22 is equal to y. If I multiply those together, I get 11 times 22 is 242. So instead of thinking pattern this way, I don't want to do that. I want to think vertically. What's happening? How do I get from 3 to 66 and from 5 to 110? Not how do I get from 3 to 5 to x to 9 to 11? Because it'd be very easy to say, oh, just plug in 7. But if I do 7 times 22, it's going to give me 154, so this is not the right answer. We have to think vertically in this case, not horizontally. Write an expression for the rule -8, -7, -6, -5, and then find the 100th term in the sequence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a table. Okay. And I'm going to say, here's the term number. It's not a hashtag, that's the sign for a number. And this is the value that we get. So by term number, I mean -8 is my first term, -7 is my second term, -6 is my third, -5 is my fourth, etc. So I'm going to plug in term, I'm just saying what's my first term, what's my second term, what's my third term, what's my fourth term, and it's going to keep going. And then for the value, my first term is -8. My second term is -7. My third term is -6, and my fourth term is -5. So again, I want to think vertically. I want to think, how do I get from 1 to -8, from 2 to -7, etc. And sometimes it's going to be pretty simple. It's going to be like, oh, I just add this, or I'm going to just multiply this. But it's not always going to be that simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, how do I get from 1 to -8? Well, to get from 1 to -8, there are two different operations I could do. I could either multiply, I could do 1 times -8 is -8, or I could do addition, subtraction, and I could say, what do I have to add or subtract to 1 to get -8? Well, if I set it up like this, I would have to subtract 1 from both sides, and I would get x equals -9. So in other words, what I'm saying is I could do -9. Let me check that though. I can either do minus or times -8 or like -9 plus -9. If I do 2 times -8, 2 times -8 is -16, which doesn't match our pattern. So I can't use the -8. But what if I do 2 minus 9. What am I going to get? Negative 7. Huh. Okay, so I could do minus 9. If I do 3 minus 9, I'm going to get negative 5. And if I do 4 minus 9, I said negative 5, I meant negative 6. And if I do 4 minus 9, I get negative 5. So here's my rule. What I'm going to do is say that, let's say the value, v equals I'm going to take the term number, I'm going to use n minus 9. So whatever the term number is, I just subtract 9 and that gives me the value. So there's my expression. That's the first half. The second half is to find the 100th term in the sequence. So I'm going to say v equals, and I'm going to have n minus 9, but I know that my term number is 100, so I'm actually going to write 100 minus 9. And if I do 100 minus 9, I get 91. And so that would be my 100th term. Let's look at a couple more. Write an expression for the rule, negative 1, 1, 3, 5. So I'm going to look at my table. So I've got term, number, and value. So I've got first term, across the top it should always be 1, 2, 3, 4, or however many terms you have, because this is always the first term. They're not going to start in the middle of a sequence. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then negative 1, 1, 3, and 5. And now I'm going to say, how do I get from 1 to negative 1, from 2 to 1, from 3 to 3? Well, to get from 1 to negative 1, I could either do 1 times a number equals negative 1, or I could do 1 plus a number equals negative 1. To do 1 times a number, I would have to then say, oh, well, really, I don't have to divide by 1 because 1 times x is just x. So I would say, okay, I could multiply by negative 1, or I could have 1 plus x equals negative 1, subtract 1, and x equals negative 2. Or I could subtract 2. So let's see if one of these fits for the others. 2 times negative 1 is going to give me negative 2, so that doesn't work. But 2 minus 2 does not give me 1. So now I have a little bit of a problem because it's not just a one-step thing. It's not a add this number or multiply this number and you're good. I'm going to have to do two different things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I have to get, how am I getting from negative 1 to 1? Well, I'm adding 2. Every time I do this, I add 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write v equals, and that 2, because that's what I'm adding every time, is going to go in front of n. But then I'm going to have to add or subtract a number. So neither of those worked. So I'm going to have, let me plug in 2. If I say I have v equals 2n plus, and I'm trying to figure out what do I need to add or subtract. Let me pick this second one. I just want to use that value for fun. I know that my value is 1, and my term number is 2, and then I still have to find x. So I would get 1 equals 4 plus x minus 4 on both sides, and I would get x equals negative 3. So what this is saying is that I would have to do multiply the term number by 2 and subtract 3. So if I do 3 times 2, I get 6 minus 3 is 3, and that works. 4n minus 3, that would give me 8 minus 3 is 5, so that works, and this is my expression. And then to find the 75th term, I'm going to do v equals 2 times 75 minus 3. I'm just going to get v equals 150 minus 3, which is 147. And that would be my answer.